Everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from January 28th, 2022. I'm recording this on July 29th, 2022. I give you the dates so that you know when this information is actually relevant because the market is always moving and changing. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. They each put out a list of 10 comics each week. We look at those lists, we compare the books on them. We see what they were doing back then, see what factors caused them to jump up. We also then look at see what's happened to them since. I know people always ask me, why 6 months, why not a year, why not 3 months? I feel like 6 months is long enough that whatever caused them to jump then is usually like not in anybody's consciousness at the moment. But it's not too long to be completely like that multiple cycles could have happened to affect the book. So that's what we do 6 months. So let's get into this list, see what we can learn. If you've been watching lately, what you've learned is all of these books have dropped. This week is a little better performing list than we've had in a while. But let's dig into it. First up, we have one that's kind of interesting, not our typical kind of books that make the list. This is Mau's Survivor's Tale, or Mouse, A Survivor's Tale. I don't know exactly how you're supposed to pronounce it. But this hit the list, not even though I have it listed as here when the first print came out. All prints of this were on the list, basically. People were just buying this up like crazy. It was really about sales and not about pricing back then, and that's because it had gotten banned again. It's not the first time that people have tried to ban this book. They were banning it kind of for some ridiculous reasons. So that's why I hit the list. I have some values here, what Tom put down, and then what I found currently, what you could buy a copy for, that $10 to $25 range. Not necessarily that first print, but just to get a copy of the book is really what this is about. What I can say is if you've never read this, you should read it. And if you're afraid of this book, you should rethink some of your values. That's all I can say. But yeah, definitely worth a read if you've never read this one. And a great, great book that really, in a lot of ways, changes what we can do, what we should think about what we can do with this kind of art form. So next, let's move into the more typical stuff. First up, we got Godzilla #1 from 1977, and this was hit the list based on, obviously it's hit the list multiple times whenever there's been a Godzilla movie in the last few years. This time it was because we're supposedly getting a TV show now. Back then, raw copies were up to 65, on average, a 9.8 was going for $6.75. Now it's a $20 to $60 book for a raw copy. 9.8 will cost you $500 to $700. Almost said 50. $500 to $700. So drop back a little bit, not a ton. And I'll be back for sure on this one. No real buzz at the moment about when the show is coming, or if it's, I think it is still coming, but when it's going to happen, we don't know yet. I would think a Godzilla show would be pretty high budget in order to look good. So we'll see. So that was our only kind of option TV shows thing that wasn't DC or Marvel related. Next, we're going to move into our covers, and we only have 2 of those this week. We got Deathstroke Incorporated, #5, the Nathan Surgery 1 in 25. And this hot Black Canary cover was going for 125 plus back then. So 1 in 25, 125 plus, that's over 5 times ratio. That usually would mean that book's going to do really well and potentially hold. But in this case, not so much. It's now a $50 to $90 book, but there's only been 3 sales with books priced in that range. So very few sales recently of this book, with it being still priced pretty high. So this one's definitely turned into a trap. They're out there, but people aren't willing to pay those prices anymore. Sexy Black Canary cover, but I can think of a few I actually like better. But yeah, and this one is definitely not held, despite the huge value that we got right off the bat that typically holds on a little better if they go that high. Next, our other cover of the week is Mary Jane and Black Cat Beyond. #1, the Adam Hughes 1 in 50. And of course, this is his little homage take of Mary Jane's famous first appearance, where she tells Peter, "Face it, tiger, you just hit the jackpot." Felicia's stealing her line, and kind of a fun Adam Hughes cover. And this one was up to 110 to 120 plus. Again, in this case, you're talking just over double ratio, not the triple on a 1 in 50, which means what it did is pretty typical. It's now $50 to $90 book, so between double and triple, or between ratio and double, sorry, was where it settled. That's pretty normal if it doesn't get over triple ratio. 9.8, 180 to 225. Still really good value for this one in 50, just not near the initial craziness. Still a little bit of a trap from that initial crazy prices. Because most of the sales on both of these are more in the $60 range than the $90 range, the $50, $60 range than the $90 range. So, next, we're going to move into Comic Buzz, and we have a ton of Comic Buzz books this week. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 Comic Buzz related books, which is a lot. Nice to see books moving because of what's happening in the comics and not just what's happening in the MCU. First up, we have, although you could argue this is because people think it'll happen in the MCU, but first up we have Black Panther #3, the first appearance of Tosin. People were already screaming, this is going to be the new Miles based on a 10-page side story in Black Panther. Don't know if that's the case, but right out of the gate, it was only a $10 to $15 book for this A cover. As we'll see in later weeks, it went much higher than this, and it has stayed higher than this initial pricing. $20 to $70 now for raw copy. 9.8 will run you $150 to $250. This first appearance of Tosin. People are betting on this character. It is definitely up and been straight cash from at least the initial prices right after it was released. A lot of crazy buzz for this character. We will see if it pays off with anything. I think he's only actually appeared one more time in the comics since then, maybe twice at this point. But we haven't gotten a ton of Tosin yet, so we'll see what he amounts to. I know he'd kind of disappeared for a while and then jumped back here just recently. He reappeared, so people were back on the Tosin train. Next, we have the 1 in 25 of that same book. We have Black Panther #3, the Torrin Clark 1 in 25 of the first appearance of Tosin. Back then, at release, this 1 in 25 was going for 200 plus. Now, raw copies will cost you $250 to $350. 9.8 will cost you $7 to $850 on this one. And this is really people just specking on this 1 in 25 aspect of a first appearance, I think. Why this has gone for just so crazy prices. Because we've seen like what the 1 in 25 of Miles has done. We've seen what the 1 in 25 of Gwen has done. Like, those are really big books. So people are wanting to be ahead of this. I do wonder about this. The only thing I can think with this Tosin thing is he's the next big thing, and they haven't really even used him that much as I think back to the Naomi release and the crazy prices people were paying for the first appearance of Naomi and for 9.8s of Naomi, and what you can get those books for now. And it's been up, it's been straight cash to this point, and has held and done pretty well. I would still be a little cautious with this one. We will see what happens with Tosin. Next, we have New X-Men #23, the first appearance of Gentle. And basically, he's got some he is a Wakandan mutant, and he's got some, I believe, Wakandan, or he was in Wakanda. Anyway, he's got some ties to Tosin. I don't know. I've been reading this. But that's why his first appearance kind of jumped up on the radar. Back then, raw copies were going for $30 to $40. Now it's back kind of where it was, a $10 to $25 book. So this one turned into a bit of a trap that has not sustained and not held on, and definitely more than definitely a 50% or more reduction here in value. I actually like this character the few times I've read him, but I don't know exactly what his ultimate relationship here is with Tosin. So we'll see. Next, we got another dual book situation. We got Thor #21, the A cover, the origin of the God of Hammers. This was going for $10 right off the bat. There was an argument this wasn't just the origin, but the first full. I haven't been reading the Kate's Thor run, so I can't comment on what the difference is, but there was an argument. This was the first full, and 20 was the cameo. Anyway, this was up to $10 back then. Now it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8 going only $30 to $50. So this has basically been steady from those initial prices. I believe this may be on the list again sometime in the next couple weeks that it went higher than this. But in terms of this first initial rush, $10, so double cover. That's basically what it is now, and so it's pretty much stayed right there. Not a ton of value for even a 9.8 though. 30 to 50. That's basically your 5 to 10 plus your grading fee. So you're not making much money on this book for sure. But we also had the Thor #21, the 1 in 25 Michael Walsh cover. Same deal here. This one in 25 jumped all the way up to $70 to $80 right off the gate. And this one's turned into a bit of a dumpster fire. It's now a $10 to $30 book for the most part. There was one outlier sale around 90. It was definitely an outlier. Everything else was 10 to 30. 9.8s were going 30 to 60 on this thing. 9.8s you could literally get cheaper than a couple of the raw sales. So yeah, definitely not a book to have chased, and not a book to still be chasing. I think definitely be patient on this thing because they're out there and they're really not that expensive if you're patient. With that, we still got more comic buzz. We got Reptile #1, the first appearance of Eva Quintero, and basically this hit the list because she was being added to the Strange Academy lineup. She was going to Strange Academy, going to be a new student. So went back to her first appearance, hit the list. Raw copies were going for 15. 9.8 was up to 90. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. Most of the sales in the 10-ish, 5-ish range. 9.8 now a $40 to $80 book. So this one's definitely an I'll be back. I think Strange Academy is currently on hiatus, I believe. Maybe there's one more issue coming. I think it's currently on hiatus before they start the second semester, I believe. So yeah, we're currently waiting for the next volume of Strange Academy. But yeah, it's so there hasn't been much going on here. Maybe if she plays a bigger role in semester 2, then it might jump back up a little bit. Next, we had a whole bunch of speculation. The next 2 books, again, are related to the same kind of speculation. First up is Swordmaster #1, the first solo and origin of Swordmaster, who everyone was specking was going to be the new Iron Fist. That has come to pass. Raw copies back then were going for $18 on average. The 9.8 hit 200. Now it's a $5 to $15 on the raw side, so just kind of a trap because most sales are actually under 10. But a 9.8 was a dumpster fire. It was $25 to $50 is value what you can get a 9.8 of this book. So if you paid a high sale of 200 back then, yeah, that was a big mistake. Definitely turned into a bit of a trap, even with this spec at the time, because it wasn't for sure back then. But everyone thought it was for sure, but it wasn't confirmed at that point. Even with that coming true, this book is not held. And similar, not quite as dramatic on Swordmaster #12, which is really just the last issue of this low print run series. You don't see last issues make the list very much anymore. They used to be a big thing because they were low print and harder to get. Occasionally you'll see one pop up. This one popped up, even though it's a relatively new book. Back then, raw copies were going for 30. Now it's a $10 to $30 book, so there still are some sales up there, but there's a lot of sales in that $10 to $15 range. And some in the 20s, so it's definitely an I'll be back, as opposed to, there's enough sales on the upper end of this 10 to 30 range that it's an I'll be back and not a trap. But, yeah, definitely another book that's backed up, not as dramatically as Swordmaster #1, though. All right, and our final Comic Buzz book of the week is our one kind of indie on the list this week, and that is Duel #1. This was just a hot indie that was a low print from a small publisher. Back then, raw copies were around 15 to 20. Now, it's like 10 to 30. It's a little all over the place what the books are going for, but a 9.8 will cost you 90. So this one's actually been pretty much steady worth it. If you got in at that 15, 20-ish range, you're doing okay. You're basically still worth that, if not a little more. You might be able to get a little bit more out of it. Not sure anything about the series. I don't feel this is, as you've seen, because there's no predictions this week. This was a week I did not do, that I missed Cash or Trash. So I had no predictions this week. So I didn't even I have never heard anything about this series, even back then, because this is the first I heard of it when I went to do the look back. I was like, oh, I don't remember that indie. So we'll see. Apparently there are at least some people that are still enjoying it and like wanting that first appearance, or that first issue. All right, with that, we got 3 MCU books before we actually are going to finish this week on DC stuff, which is rare, but we are going to finish with DC this time. First up for MCU is some just random MCU spec. We got Fantastic Four #358, the first appearance of Pybok, the Power Scroll. Basically, there was a casting for a character for the Secret Invasion show, And so everybody was speculating on which scroll is this guy going to be, and people were kind of betting on this, caused this book to jump up to $15. 9.8 going for $3.50. There was no news here. This was just people guessing that we might get Pybok. Now it's a $1 to $10 book. 9.8 down from $3.50 all the way down to $1 to $1.20. So again, you're looking at almost another kind of dumpster fire on the 9.8 side, but a definite trap on this book overall. We'll see. We've gotten a little more news related to Secret Invasion and stuff here lately, in terms from Marvel, but not a ton of stuff yet. There have been a few set photos leak out, that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see what we get from Secret Invasion and if we get Pybok, this Power Scroll. Next, we have Moon Knight number 3. This is the from 2016 run. This is the first appearance of Dr. Emmett. And basically, this was post the Moon Knight trailer, and people were specking on who Layla was, that Mark gets a message from, and with the Croc. And this is a character that kind of sort of fits a little bit of that. Turned out to not be this character at all. But anyway, back then it was a $5 book. Now it's a $1 to $15 book. 9.8, one sale went for $67. Steady in and I'll be back, I guess. There were lots of sales back then, not a lot of sales right now. So from that standpoint, sales have definitely dropped off, but the value still basically, it's $5 then, it wasn't high, and it's still basically in that same range. All right, last MCU book, speculation book this week is all new Ghost Rider number 1. The first Robbie Reyes is Ghost Rider. Back then it was up to $75 based on people specking we were going to get Ghost Rider and Doctor Strange. Or if not then, in something else, which I think we will get him eventually in something else, but we did not get him in Doctor Strange. Now it's a $30 to $60 book. 9.8, $3 to $3.75. So this one turned into a bit of an I'll be back. Down a little bit, but not dramatically. Still a lot of people thinking we're going to get Ghost Rider, and Robbie is as good a guess as any for which version we get. All right, our two DC books this week are both related to DC TV or maybe a movie. First up is Batgirl number 1. This is the first appearance of Alicia Yeoh, who was, we got casting news on this friend of Barbara Gordon's, from the HBO show / movie. I'm still not sure we know if it's going to be a show or a movie for sure. But anyway, back then this was going for $15. 9.8 hit $150. Now that's a $5 to $20 book, with most of the sales in that 10 to 15ish range. So we'll call this steady, and then I'll be back. But yeah, so we'll see. We're supposed to get this character. I don't know that she's really going to move the needle a ton. I do like this run. This character's good character, but definitely a side character. So I doubt that they can carry a lot of importance going forward. We'll see. And then last, we have a book that is our only repeat from last week, and that is Teen Titans Annual number 2. First, Adrian Chase as Vigilante. Raws we're going for, basically, this was kind of the flip list, although there was an increase in 9.8 prices between the 2 weeks. But Raw copies were still going in that same $30 range. 9.8 going for $325 plus. Now it's a $7 to $25 book on the Raw side, a $250 to $275 book on the 9.8 side. So definitely down. And I'll be back. But those are our books. We had 18 books this week. We had a lot of comic buzz, and not just. Oh, and we still had a little bit of poor MCU spec, and then we had people banning books again, which I guess this is a good time to remind you that if they're banning it, it's probably worth reading. So with that, I'm going to get out of here. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.